Welcome back. Sign that guy. I'm John Wesley Tizzle. I don't even say it, you pervert. Don't even fucking say it. I had it timed just perfectly. I was like, hold on, Joseph. All right, go now. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my dear friend, Franck. And we have a very special Tie Night Guy today. And what are we talking about today, Ty?
Well, I hope we're talking about Escape from New York, because if we're not, then I'm not prepared.
Well, here's the thing, Ty. I could have woke you up at 2 a.m. and throw cold water on your face, took you out of your bed, stripped you naked, waterboarded you for 3 hours, interrogated you about something that you never did, and then say, hey, do you want to do a podcast on Escape from New York? And you would be prepared. You would be, you know this movie so
true.
well.
That's fair.
You cannot be shaken out of it. So in terms of doing Escape from New York, you're ready to go at all times.
Once we get started on Escape from New York, we're not going to want to stop. So before we dive into that, there is some other business we should take care of. We didn't talk about it last week, and we should have, but I think we were all still kind of rocked by it. But our very good friend and actor on the show, Kenneth Welsh, died a little over a week ago. Just wanted, because we're not like one of those Hollywood shows that has to mention every dead movie star or any of that kind of thing. We're not that. But Kenneth was a really important part of the first season of the show. It's an actor I admired a great deal, and just wanted to give him a mention and pour one out for Kenneth Welsh. One of the greats. Started his career in the 60s and worked basically nonstop for almost 60 years. If you look at his IMDb page, he's got projects every year for just about 60 years. And I think the most fitting epitaph for a working actor like Kenneth Welsh, the most fitting epitaph you could possibly have is if you look at his IMDb page, he's died and he has 4 movies in post-production right now. This is a fucking working actor, man. This is a guy who put in the work, and we got 4 more movies we can look forward to from Kenneth, even now that he's gone. So, if you're listening to this, pour one out for Kenneth. Great actor, great guy. The world will miss him.
It's one of those moments of where we felt so lucky with somebody like him coming onto the Expanse, and it was early on. What's interesting about our business is that sometimes the really greats aren't really the most well-known.
Yeah.
So, if you're playing basketball and you're Michael Jordan, you're the greatest player and you're the most well-known. It doesn't necessarily always work like that. Some of the best writers or the most skilled actors that you ever work with are people that are just faces that you don't really know names to. And sometimes people that are extremely well-known, they're not as skilled, or they're not necessarily as some of these other people that you don't know.
Yeah.
And people like him, when they show up on set, everybody within the business that knows craft and has really, put the time into the work, they recognize right away how great this person is. And it's kind of weird in that way. Somebody being famous for being an actor doesn't necessarily translate to skill and craft. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you get, like a Josh Brolin, or somebody like that that's, really well known, very famous, but is also just a really good actor. But he was one of them, and it was an honor to have him on our show and to be able to work with him, and the whole community is going to miss him.
Yeah, and if you're a horror fan like Wes and I are, he made a movie a few years back called The Void. It's available on streaming. And we're going to be talking about John Carpenter today. It's a very sort of John Carpenter-esque horror movie. It's definitely worth your time. It didn't get a lot of attention when it came out. I watched it almost by accident.
It was a Canadian production, correct?
Canadian production.
Void?
Yeah. Kenneth was a Canadian actor, and he worked on a lot of Canadian movies and TV shows. In fact, I think it was Canadian law that if you made a TV show in Canada, you had to hire Kenneth for at least one part. But yeah, I mean, so if for those of you who want to remember Kenneth doing what he did best, jump on streaming, watch The Void. You'll get to see an amazing, independent Canadian horror film that I really enjoyed. and get to see Kenneth, tearing up the screen because that's what he did. So that was it. I just wanted to make sure we mentioned that because I didn't want to let it pass. All right. So, and just as a sort of an addendum to that, the great Fred Ward died recently, and as anybody who listens to this show knows, Wes and I are both huge fans of Mr. Ward's work. We talked about Tremors on the show. We've talked about Remo Williams on the show. Another great has passed.
It's one of those things that, I mean, it really affects me because you feel like you know these people. You feel like you're friends with these people. And when they pass, it's like, it really kind of, shakes me up a little bit because I'm like, oh, God, I mean, think about how much time you spent watching Tremors, and you kind of develop a friendship and everything like that. But today we're talking about Escape from New York. And, I knew that I loved Carpenter. I knew that I was a John Carpenter fan. But going back, I mean, I have an even deeper admiration for him. Because Assault on Precinct 13, that was my first time seeing that. And I was completely blown away by that. But going back and watching this carefully, again, he does the thing that I love that we always talk about. I mean, this is an action movie, but number one, it's really restrained. It's very, it's really strategic in how it uses its action. Whereas action movies now, it's just like, they just spray action on the screen and every frame of every is like a CGI or something blowing up. Yep. And you get desensitized to it. You get desensitized. But then if you're really strategic with it and you pick, your moments to have it, but the world is so weird and so interesting that you're fascinated and the plot is so tight and it's an excellent premise and it just drags you along. But he uses horror like he used in Assault on Precinct 13, like this is a zombie movie, with the crazies coming out of the subway and they're knocking on the thing and these guys come out of the subway. And, to combine that with action, it's just the best mixture that you can do. I was going to ask you, when did you see this for the first time?
This is one of those that I didn't see until VHS because, I grew up in a pretty conservative, restrictive household. I didn't get to go to a lot of this kind of movie when I was a kid, but I don't remember if I rented it. My parents weirdly would leave me home alone for extended periods of time, even when I was a teenager. And whenever that happened, the first thing I would do is walk down to the video store and rent everything, rent 27 videos and take them home. Everything I'd wanted to see that I wasn't able to watch because my parents would freak out. And I think this might have been one of those where I was like, I had read the back of the box in the video store and I said, yeah, this is my jam. I got to check this out. Waited till my parents weren't around, rented it. And yeah, I mean, it blew me out of my living room. I mean, it was so not, because I was like sci-fi and I was a sci-fi dude. I wanted sci-fi. So it was sci-fi, but it was so unlike any other sci-fi I had ever seen up to that point. It was like this near future, almost, it was post-apocalyptic without being post-apocalyptic. It wasn't like after a nuclear war. I'd seen that. I'd seen Mad Max, It wasn't that.
It's 97.
But it's not like we're living in this fucked up world because nuclear bombs hit. We just took all of the worst people in the world, stuck them on this island and turned them loose there. Right. And then just put some machine guns around the island, said, all right, you guys all stay there. And then the society that arises from that, when everyone on the island is a criminal, the society that arises. Weirdly, it didn't turn into Australia because, it should have, right? Because that's what the British did with Australia, stuck all their prisoners there.
Wouldn't it be funny if they show up and it's like everybody has an Australian accent, right? There's kangaroos, and it's just Australia.
But yeah, so I'm pretty sure I watched it the first time on VHS, and it immediately became one of my favorite movies. And I've seen it probably, 50, 60 times since then in various forms.
I still remember the poster in the VHS. That's when I came across it too. I still remember it's like Kurt Russell holding, I think it was, what was Carpenter's wife's name in the,
Adrienne Barbeau.
Adrienne Barbeau. What's interesting is that on the cover, he's holding her hand and he's running and his gun's blazing. You see the Statue of Liberty that's fallen on the thing. And I still remember that and seeing it, but that's not his love interest in the thing. But they, on the cover, they had to create that. I remember how strange, when I first started watching, I was like, what is this world? He goes in and there's this weird burlesque show and I'm drawing a blank on the fantastic character actor, Ernest Borgnine.
Ernest Borgnine, yeah.
Yeah, Borgnine. And he's like just into the show. And then these people, and you're like, wait a minute, what is this show? And what are they doing putting this thing on? And then he goes through and there's all this weird shit that's happening. And there's one guy that's warming his hands by the fire and he's like, I like your boots, man. And then these guys pop out of the shadows and Snake fucks him up. And then he sees, and this is, what is this guy doing? He has another guy over the sink because he's tracking the pulse device for the president.
Yep.
And he's just slowly punching this guy over the seat, just punching him in his face, right? And Plissken rolls up and you see the guy's arm out and he has this thing. And this guy, and it's not like it's real slow. It's just like punch.
Yep.
Punch. And then he fucking throws him out of the way and it's some dude that's like getting off on getting punched. And you're like, what is this? What is fucking happening? And the strangeness of it really pulled me in. And that soundtrack, if God said to me, Wes, every human is now going to have a soundtrack for their life that you can hear in real time, I'm hiring John Carpenter to do my soundtrack because his fucking sound, dude. When they're doing that pan shot of the bass and everything, and it's like doom doom, and I'm just like, I'm fucking in, dude. Synthesizer all day long. My testosterone shoots up 25 points whenever I hear the synth.
Yeah, and it's always so simple. His soundtracks are so based on such simple themes, simple repeating themes, but they're so like evocative, like you hear. You're right. If I hear that soundtrack to Escape from New York, I'm just in an action mood. Like I'm ready for some shit to go down.
Going back to like seeing the beginning of this, I am surprised at how big this movie was because this wasn't a studio movie at this time, right?
It was not. And it feels bigger than it is. This movie was definitely made on the cheap.
It feels massive.
But it feels massive.
When you see the plane wreck and the thing, it feels, and I'm watching this and I'm like, this isn't a studio movie. And this is right after Carpenter did Halloween. Like he wasn't doing big studio movies at the time. And this movie looked huge.
Yeah. So the genius of those sort of independent directors and filmmakers like Carpenter was at the time is the greats can do that. The greats can take $100,000 and make it feel like $10 million, right? I don't know what the budget, off the top of my head, I don't know what the budget for Escape from New York was, but it wasn't that big. But he makes it feel, as you said, gigantic. The world feels huge and fleshed out. Yeah, that is. And the other thing that I love about this period of sort of independent filmmaking is the really great model work that they do. Because, they didn't have CGI, not like we think of CGI. So things like the landing of the glider on top of the building and the plane crash and all of that stuff and those cool, awesome, like panning shots of New York prison, that's all models. The meticulous model making that goes into building that stuff and animating it. Every time I like, and you watch it, it's a model, right? Like you can tell it is, but it doesn't matter. It's so awesome that your suspension of disbelief just goes away.
And also, this is a time when you're just now starting to play, video games. This is still Atari days or whatever. And so all that stuff is like, just gets you excited. In the beginning, when you see New York and you see how it builds like the fence that's going around, it looks like a video game. Yep. And Jamie Lee Curtis, you hear her voice describing the history of how this became a penitentiary. And it's one of the greatest premises of all time. Greatest premises of action. If that movie never existed and I came here and I was like, Ty, I got this idea. They take New York and they turn it into a prison. They dump all the prison. They build a wall around it, and the president's flying over, and then he crashes in there, and they get Snake Plissken, and you'd be like, that is the greatest fucking idea I've ever heard. Because it's so cool, like the setup, and you're so into it. I will say, watching this, I was a little bit underwhelmed by Plissken's introduction, and I know now. Because there was his introduction was like this big robbery. It's like a 10-minute long robbery. You can watch it on YouTube. It's a deleted scene. And that was the proper Snake Plissken introduction where you see, they're robbing something and you see this guy come out and he's taking his uniform off and goes to the boots, goes to his back. You see the Kurt Russell hair fall on his neck. And then he walks and he's got that weird like camo pants on and the sleeveless shirt, tank top shirt. And then through that scene, you see that he has this moral compass, like his loyalty to his friend, because he could have got away, but he didn't abandon his friend. He stayed. And it's this great scene. But I understand why they took it out. But I think it would have been better if there would have been something like that just condensed where it hits all those beats. Because now where it is the bus just pulls up and Plissken just walks out, when he goes out there.
I hear what you're saying, and we are very modern. Hollywood has conditioned us to expect the big character introduction, right? But I think one of the things that I like about Escape from New York is everything we know about Snake Plissken comes from people's reactions to him, and I kind of like that. I kind of like that the guards at the prison are scared of him. That when he gets to New York, Ernest Borgnine going, "Oh my God, Snake Plissken!" Like, people's reactions to him tell you about him. I don't know. You don't see that a lot anymore, or you don't see it well done a lot anymore, and I really like it.
So I agree with you. Like David Mamet, his big thing, like doing the unit, is like, stop! Don't tell me what the character is. Show me. Yeah. I want to see the character. Don't in the heading. Don't say he's 32 and he likes to play cards on Saturday night and he's not in love with his wife and he hasn't. He's like, show me through actions, show me through talking, throw me motivation. And I understand that, but I do think there is an element of Plissken that we do not know, because in some ways you see it and you're like, oh, this guy was like a war hero who kind of became a sociopath later, and everybody is terrified of him, and he has respect and all these things. And there's a certain morality or a certain moral compass or standard that he has that he doesn't violate, And then at the end with the tape, which I still need a little bit more clarification on the tape, which we'll get to when we get to that point. But I would have liked I cared for him a lot more, and I know that this is the whole. I know it's almost cliche where the protagonist needs to do something good or something like that, but this is something different where he was about to get away, but he didn't leave his partner. So then, when all the like gritty, tough Stalingrad talk and the history of them knowing him, there's something about him that there's like he's a soldier, right? He's not just a pure criminal, which I thought was really interesting. Now, the crazies, when they tap on the sewer and all those guys start coming up, to me, I could watch a movie just about those guys and how they operate and how they survive when they're in there. There was a scene in there that was kind of, so when he goes in a chock full of nuts, he runs into that lady that's smoking a cigarette who's been stuck in there overnight. And it's kind of an interesting thing that's in there. That was his real life wife at the time. Susan Hubley was her name. And so it was kind of like a cameo from her or whatever. It was Kurt Russell's real life wife. But when the guys start exploding from the floor and they pull her under, that's horror, man. I mean, that is like such a scary. And then you're along for the ride at that point. You're like, what is this world, and who is? If I feel like one thing that Carpenter does well is he makes it. It's weird, right? It's not like a lot of people would do, like just a bunch of tough guys in there. But no, these guys are like, they've lost their fucking minds. They've been isolated for so long. They're living in the dark. And is the guy's name Romero? Because I didn't hear his name in the movie. The crazy haired guy.
Oh, no, I don't remember what his name is. The guy who comes out and says, leave now or he dies. That guy.
So his name, his name's Franck Doubleday. That's the actor's name. And his name's Romero. I just want to say he's one of my favorite actors. That performance, he's one of my favorite actors of all time. I went back and watched it. I'm like, what? Like the interesting choices. Yeah. And he was so big, but it didn't seem like it was big. It was subtle. When he walks and he's got
he's got that weird walk when he shows up. Yep.
Yeah. the walk like this, and then he kind of does this bow and he shows a finger and he's like, touch me, he dies. Yep. If you don't leave in 18 minutes, he dies. If you come back, he dies. And I'm like, I want a movie about this guy.
He also plays the guy who shoots the little girl in Assault on Precinct 13. And he plays a weirdo in that too. Like he just was this guy who he was kind of a strange looking guy, but not like over the top strange looking. but he had this affectation that he could pull off where he simultaneously seemed like that weird dude you hope doesn't get on the bus the same time as you, and also incredibly intimidating, right? Like, it's such an interesting guy.
Interesting guy, but interesting choices that were funny, but interesting and spooky.
Yeah.
And he was captivating. And, you know, an actor preparing that, like, it takes a lot of courage because that could maybe Bill Paxton could pull something like that off, but to be big in that manner. You know, what's interesting is that when he was riding with the Duke and they were in the car, he was riding in the same spot that he rode in Assault on Precinct 13, which is the passenger side back seat.
Right.
And I didn't know if that was like kind of a throwback or whatever, but he was riding that when they're driving and they're looking back. But one of my favorite moments he has is when the brain, Harry Dean Stanton, and John Carpenter's wife, when they're like, they come around and they're like, he had a gun pointed at us, and this where they kind of they turn coat on Snake Plissken.
Yep.
And he listens to him, and the Duke's like, likely story. And then he's walking off, and he just points at him as he's going, like, gives this thing, and like follows him when he's not even looking, just pointing like, I see you, I know what you're doing. And it just cracks me up every time I see it. Just cracks me up.
Yeah, no, he's an interesting guy. And he didn't work a lot, unfortunately.
I'd like to know his story.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, because somebody that's clearly talented like that, I mean, he was doing every bit as interesting as the guy that did Gollum or anything like that. When he made all these choices when the Duke was shooting at the president, and he goes, ah! That's that laugh. And then he traded the cabbie for the Cavs hat. Yep. and for the tape, and the guy comes in and he's wearing the cabbie's hat. And then when he kills him, it's like, and I hope Joseph will put some in there, but when he kills him and he's like, oh, like the thing, and he falls. Anyway, I was a big fan of Frank Doubleday. I think he was excellent in this thing, and really, really contributed to the weirdness and everything.
I got to say, to add to that, a friend of mine who didn't see Escape from New York until, I don't know, a few years ago. I was like, you've never seen this movie? We have to watch it. So I made him watch it with me. And his comment was that Frank Doubleday was playing, what's the name of that little bird monster that sits on Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi?
Oh yeah.
He's like that
I don't
dude.
remember the name
that
of it.
dude is playing the live action version of that bird. He just hangs out with the big boss, laughs at all of his jokes.
What did you think of Donald Pleasance being the president?
I mean, it was fine. Like, obviously, he and Carpenter knew each other, and Donald Pleasance has a bit of gravitas to him. So, his accent doesn't seem like presidential.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. It was the only kind of weird choice for me in it. Like he had that slight accent, and he was, it was kind of like this British president, and it's like, okay, it's the future, but what is that? I don't know. I didn't like that choice, but I loved Lee Van Cleef in it. I love the ponytail. I love the look. I like a little bit of the randomness of the things that, the things that he said. And Carpenter always has that ticking clock. It's like Assault on Precinct 13. Like they knew that they were going to shut the power down at this time or this day. And then they put that thing into Plissken that had the timer on it when he went over there and did the things he did. I'm pretty sure there was no weapon sounder on that because Snake Plissken had the worst weapons handling of all time of any movie. He's just swinging his gun, finger on the trigger, swinging the gun, and then there's times when he's like climbing a fence and his gun's off. It's almost like a mistake, right? Like he comes and the gun's, and he's all like chasing the gun as it's flown out of his hands, and he gets it and he puts it on. And then there's times when he's bored and he's just swinging it around and talking and everything. And it's like, it's like this guy was in, was it Leningrad? Like Plissken's backstory that they show windows to of like this cool Russian war, that we had with communist China and Russia, and he was like this war hero. And when he ran into the brain, he was like, I haven't seen you since, what was it? Like there was some battle in America or something that he saw him in. I thought that was really interesting. And talk about the cast, I really like seeing Tom Atkins in the beginning.
he's one of those guys who's in, obviously he's in a Halloween movie, so I'm sure that's where he knew Carpenter. I'm not sure which of those movies came out first, but clearly he and Carpenter had worked together or continued to work together. But he's one of those guys who like he's in every kind of low budget action movie. He just shows up in all of them, and he just plays. Yeah. He plays an angry police chief better than almost anybody who's ever played an angry police chief. Yeah.
His greatest moment was in Lethal Weapon.
Yep.
When he's like, "Avenge me!" So did your friend like the movie, the one that you showed it to him?
Yeah, he did. I mean, I knew he would. That's why I showed him. Anybody who's into like that era of action movies, if you haven't seen Escape from New York, you're missing a huge part of the catalog, right? So it was one of those things. If you haven't seen it, we have to correct that. It also established, I think, the prototype for the cool, soft-spoken action guy. I mean, Kurt Russell creates that prototype with Snake Plissken. The guy, he's too cool for school. He's got this like epic reputation that he doesn't, he never brags about himself, but everybody knows who he is. He doesn't yell. He keeps it down here like this, and
he's imitating Clint Eastwood.
He is, but Clint Eastwood comes across more aggressive. Okay, so I guess the big difference for me is Clint Eastwood is the Dirty Harry. Clint Eastwood is like every pissed off Republican cop who wants to shoot a guy, right? Snake Plissken is the guy who started out that guy and realized it's all bullshit and now doesn't give a fuck. Like, the thing you know about Dirty Harry is he gives a fuck. The thing you know about Snake Plissken is all the fucks he had to give got used up in Leningrad. He's out of those now, and he's just going through life not giving a fuck. And I think that is the genius of the Snake Plissken character and what differentiates him as an action hero.
I think him destroying the tape at the end, that was the Dirty Harry scene when Dirty Harry throws the badge into the lake. Yeah. At the end when he realizes it's all bullshit and he doesn't fucking and they throw it. They have that same kind of
right. But I think Snake tearing up that tape is not his moment of realization. That's just him being who he is now. I think the way the movie plays out, Snake had that moment. Snake had the throw away the badge moment somewhere over Leningrad and has just been running wild ever since, right?
There's a moment at the end with Donald Pleasance when he goes up to him and he says, can I just have, he wanted to talk to him about something, and he goes, yeah, I got 3 minutes, anything you want, whatever. And he's talking to him. But as he's about to talk to him, he asked him a few questions and he realized that the president was really concerned. He was looking at himself in the mirror and like barely paying attention, and it was all politics. And so then Plissken was basically like, never mind. He didn't even ask him what, so you never knew what it was that he was there. Cause he watched him and he saw, oh, this is the guy that I knew that he was, and this is the same fucking game. And then he walks away and makes that decision. And so maybe there was a moment of hope because he saved this president,
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there was a moment of hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. They went through this traumatic experience together. I think there was, like you said, a moment of hope that maybe this guy could be different. And then when he realizes he's not, he just goes back to who he was. Plissken just goes back to who he was.
But at the end, what's interesting is the president does stop him to create a target so it'll pull the Duke out and then he can shoot the Duke, like he could expose the Duke. But then he brings Plissken up. He does bring him up. So I do think, Plissken was kind of wondering, like, let's see what kind of a guy this is or what kind of a leader he is, and let's do this thing. And then Van Cleef at the end was like, hey, I got another job for you, at the end. Yeah. And he's like, are you going to kill me? He's like, I'm too tired. Maybe another day. But it's really tight, like structural. Was there anything that surprised you in the plot? Like, is there anything that was there a turn that you didn't see coming?
The first time I watched it? Yeah, there was plenty of them. I mean, I was young, so I wasn't quite as sophisticated about how plots work, but when I first time I watched it, there was tons of stuff that surprised me. I mean, one of the things when Plissken gets all of his guns and stuff at the beginning and gets dropped into New York, what you're expecting is he's going to shoot a bunch of dudes, he's going to kick ass, and he's going to rescue the guy, and it'll be running gun battles and stuff. One of the first things that happens to Plissken, I shouldn't say one of the first things, but one of the consistent things that happen as the movie goes on is they take away everything that he was given. They take away all his stuff. He loses his guns. He loses, like all the special like equipment that he had. He loses all of it, right? And by the end, about 2/3 into the movie, he's fighting a dude in a boxing ring with nail-covered baseball bats and garbage can shields. I mean, that is not what I saw coming, because that's not what I thought action movies were. Action movies where the good guy has a gun and he kicks ass, right? Snake Plissken, they fuck him up that whole movie. He loses everything. He loses all of his stuff. He loses all his gear. He gets shot in the leg. He gets limping around. The lengths that Carpenter goes to beat the shit out of his hero before his hero can finally win, I was not used to.
Yeah. What I wasn't used to too, because this was, in the 80s, this was the season of Commando and Rambo and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Stallone and like these mythical, jacked, steroided superheroes that, didn't have any vulnerabilities or anything. What I thought was really interesting and struck me was like, this was just an average guy. There is things sometimes that annoy me, like the Blade Runner, when they come in, it's like, we need you, Decker. We need the Blade Runner. We need the best. And if you go back and watch, he's not the best at what? He kind of gets his ass kicked through the whole thing, and he doesn't really figure it out. He's just kind of there, and it kind of, ends up kind of falling in his lap. It's not him kind of pushing everything. But what I saw within this was here's a guy, and his superpower is his courage and his strength of heart. And he acquired this reputation that I don't think that it's almost like, I don't think he identifies with it. It's almost like there's a legend about him that he thinks is ridiculous. And so when he's in this thing, he just has the balls and the courage to do what it takes, but he's not special. He doesn't have any, when he's in the ring with that big guy, he gets his ass kicked until he, has a moment of just toughness and does the thing. The consistency of this, because even when the crazies are coming out, he's fighting for his life. It's not like he's standing like Batman and just kicking everybody's ass. He's crawling, he's busting through windows and crawling up fire escapes, and they're on his heels, and he's shooting some of them and shooting behind him and fucking doing everything. So it was the first time I saw like a hero like this that was a man, that was just a man. He was an average man who was tough and had courage. And I really connected to that. It's kind of like Indiana Jones,
I would struggle to describe Kurt Russell as an average guy.
An average hero.
Yeah. He's like I think I'm an average guy. Kurt Russell is not me.
but he's not like he's
not a roided out monster.
Yeah. He's not. He has a normal body. He's not like, it's not chemical enhanced. He's not like juiced out. He's not juiced to the tits. Yeah. Right. Exactly. He's a guy that's had a few beers. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He's a guy that's like, that's not, and he smokes cigarettes. Like he's not, that kind of thing. And he's just tough.
I would say that based on what you see of him and the stories about him in that movie, Snake Plissken's superpower is he's a survivor. Because the story about him is he got shot down over Leningrad, and somehow he lived through that. He got away, right? He's still alive. He's still got his freedom. He's not like in a Russian gulag somewhere. So this is a guy who, if you drop him into horrible circumstances, he finds a way to survive it. He finds a way to get out. And so I understand why you would look at a guy like that and go, if we're going to drop somebody into the middle of the world's worst prison and expect them to survive and get out, who do we send? We send the guy who got shot down over enemy territory and survived, right? I get it. I understand. Like, it makes sense to me that that's the guy you pick. And all this stuff you're talking about where he's climbing fences and he's trying to get away and he's breaking through windows and he's running away from the sewer cannibals. That's what a survivor does. Like, he's not sitting there going, I'm a badass, I'm going to fight these cannibals. He's like, you know what I don't want? I don't want to get eaten by sewer cannibals, so I'm getting the fuck out of here.
And that I admire that most.
Yeah.
Like this guy goes around, and he taps on the sewers, taps on the sewers, and these fucking freaks start pouring, and he's like, "Fuck this!" He turns around, and you see assholes and elbows when he's just hauling ass down the alleys, and I'm like, "You goddamn right, Kurt. That is what I would be doing." Was this pre-Thunderdome? I think it was.
Yeah, definitely was.
Because this was like a precursor of the Thunderdome, right? when they have him in the ring,
in the box,
with the guy,
in the
and
boxing
cheering.
ring with the baseball bats.
Yeah, what's that guy's Slag? I think that guy's name is that big guy in the thing. And I honestly say, like, going back, it could have been more Thunderdome. They didn't have the Thunderdome budget, but we could have seen, I kind of like, if you think about the Kumite with Van Damme, they did they put, wrapped bandages, put glass on the bandages, and like there's like all these different obstacles and things, and then there was all these different characters and stuff like that. There's just one big guy, they got in a fight, and but I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
But the movie wasn't about that, right? That was just one thing that happens. It wasn't about that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like, so even the Thunderdome wasn't about that fight and the thing, but it was creative. Like they had fucking chainsaws on bungee cords, like, all this stuff, there. But there was something nice about it being stripped down, and they fought with bats and all that stuff. But
it was simple, but it was brutal, right? Because if somebody puts you in that ring and that monster is standing across the ring from you, because that guy was gigantic, right? He's probably like 6'5". Looks like he weighs about 3 1/4. He's up
in Speedos.
Yeah, he's massive. And he's holding a baseball bat covered with like nails. You would piss your fucking pants, right? Like, I'm about to be beat to death with a baseball bat. That's a scary fucking moment.
Yeah, that is scary. And then I do love how it wasn't, again, going back to what we said, he's not Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like he gets his ass kicked.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He gets fucked up for a long time, but then he's just resourceful and scrappy. And he comes up, and I love it when he hits him in the back of the head, and then everybody starts going, "Snake, snake, snake." They start cheering for him. That was awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that, I mean, you've done a lot of fight training, and that, like, people will, like, size doesn't matter. Like, fake martial artists will be like, size doesn't matter. If somebody's got 100 pounds on you, it matters, right? And Kurt Russell's a big guy, and he's in shape, so he looks like he's athletic and all that. But the guy standing across the ring from him is the size of a fucking grizzly bear. That will matter. Like, so if he doesn't get his ass kicked a little bit, it's unbelievable, right? Like it's unrealistic. Right. That guy's going to knock you around. There's just no way to avoid that. And like you, I like that the reason he wins is because he's scrappy and courageous, not because he like outfights the dude, right? Because you can't outfight that guy. He's just too big. It's not, you can't karate a grizzly bear, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, one thing I was curious about is the brain has all the layout of the mines on the bridge, right?
Yep.
And they said, "Where did you get that?" And he said, "A guy." He got it from a guy that got killed he goes, "A guy got killed to get me this thing because he got blown up on a bridge." So how the fuck did he come back if he's dead? If he died on the bridge, how did he get him the plans of the grid of the mines on the bridge?
FedExed it.
Oh, he FedEx from hell? I read this. Also, do you ever watch the rewatch, or do you ever listen to Rewatchables, the podcast?
You sent me one that I listened to. Yeah.
Okay, so I heard this on the Rewatchables, but they did a focus group. Carpenter did a focus group of the movie. So originally, it didn't have the shot of her getting killed when she stayed back with the gun and the Duke is about to run her over. And so they had a focus group, and a young J.J. Abrams was in the focus group. And he suggested that it wasn't clear that she's dead, and we should know that she's dead. So Carpenter was married at the time, so they set up the shot in her garage. And they took a picture of her, and they shot, not a picture, they shot a little bit of that footage of her being dead on the ground. But how fucking cool is that? J.J. Abrams was a part of that, you know? And guess who else was a fucking part of it that worked a lot on this film? Director of photography, did a lot of the visual effects.
Oh,
James Cameron.
Really? I did not know. So that is something new for me. I did not know that he worked on the effects for this.
James Cameron. And apparently everybody on set was like, I guess they called him like the genius on set. I guess like everybody's like, this guy is going to be special. This guy is going to be, he knows what the fuck, you know. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, this had to be right before. When was Terminator? 84?
Yeah, I think it was 84. Yeah.
So this had to be right before Terminator. So he's sitting there and like really kind of taking stock and seeing all this.
Well, is this before or after he got fired off of Piranha 2?
After.
Okay, so
yeah, Piranha 2 was
he'd been
late 70s.
He'd been working for Corman for years, doing stuff for him. Then got that movie through Corman's company, Piranha 2. Got fired off of it. That's interesting. So he went back to doing special effects stuff for a while before he got Terminator. That's interesting.
I just think that's so cool that he was working on, you know. And listen, Escape from New York is, I think, one of the greatest. I love it. But Terminator is another level. Yeah. The first Terminator is another level of movie.
Well, I love John Carpenter. I think he's an incredibly influential filmmaker. Obviously, Halloween launched an entire genre of films. Escape from New York is one of my favorite action, low budget action movies ever made. I mean, he's amazing. But he's one of those guys who's great at doing a lot with a little, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly fine specialty to have. Being able to do a lot with a little allows you to have an amazing career like Carpenter had. Is he as much of a pure filmmaker as James Cameron? I don't think he is. I mean, James Cameron can do a lot with a little. He can also do a lot with a lot. Yeah. He's more of a pure filmmaker, I think, than Carpenter is. Carpenter's more like a guerrilla filmmaker, you know?
Yeah. And Cameron, it was interesting because we were talking about how big this movie was and everything like that. Cameron doesn't have any weaknesses. As a writer, as a director, as a storyteller, like everything, he's just a complete filmmaker. Whereas Carpenter, again, we talked about when he starts working with the studio, when his budget gets a little bigger, Carpenter has a strike zone that he's best in. And he's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I love him to death, but Cameron's a different being.
And the other thing that is different between the two of them, makes it hard to do a comparison, is that John Carpenter made 1,000 movies. James Cameron's made less than a dozen. So
yeah, that's a good
volume
point.
Of work.
That's a great point. I mean, I think if Carpenter had 10 years to make Avatar,
right.
you could probably make Avatar in 10 years. Direct. So but I think that's interesting. But I want to give a shout out before we leave. I want to give a shout out to how great is it when the brain finds the president and they put a wig and lipstick on the president, and you're just like, it's just so random and so weird. And Romero had something to do with it. And I think Romero is a shout out to the zombie.
Of
Romero.
Of course, he is.
The director.
Anybody in a movie or TV show named Romero is a shout out to John Romero.
But I love it because the zombie thing makes this work. Like he gives a big. There's a lot of really great zombie movies. Moments.
I don't want to stop though, because we've talked about Pleasance, we've talked about Snake, we've talked about Adrian Barbeau, and I don't want to stop, and Ernest Borgnine. I don't want to stop until we have at least a little talk about number one, the Duke of New York, one of the coolest bad guys ever. Just like the minute he shows up, you understand why he's in charge. Because he's a big, intimidating dude, but he's also cool as fuck.
I think his coolness is more what made him a leader than him being a big, tough guy.
Yeah.
See, he had an introduction because chandeliers
on your Cadillac. When you're rolling around in a Cadillac with chandeliers you're making a statement, man.
Dude, when he rolls up and he has that Cadillac and those chandeliers are shaking. I immediately was like, I like whoever this guy is. And then he gets out and he has that long coat but no shirt underneath, and he straightens it out, and he's a beautiful man. And I was like, I am on the Duke. I get it. I know why you're in charge, Duke. I know why you're in charge. Let's talk about some plot stuff.
Yeah, do it.
Did the Duke want to? He needed the brain to get the grid of the bridge, and he wanted to ride out with the president hostage. Yes. Is that what he wanted?
He wanted to get out of prison, and he thinks that the president is his way to get out.
His way to get out. So, but he needs the grid so he can drive across the bridge. And then what was on the tape?
Well, okay, so they never really, I think, get explicit with it, but my impression is that it was a breakthrough in energy technology that some scientists had come up with, that the president was going to share with Russia as a way to allow them to have peace. Like it feels like this is a world where energy shortage is the cause of the strife between these two superpowers, and there's this breakthrough technology, and it's on this tape, and he's going to share it with them, and so then everybody will have all the energy they need, and they don't have to fight wars anymore. Is the impression that I get. I could be wrong, but that seems like what it is.
No, I think you're right, but I don't know if I've read this or because I don't remember seeing it in this. I just rewatched the movie, and I'm like, wait a minute, did I read this? Or because it was some type of fusion technology. Kind of like the movie The Saint, where there's a way that they can get power for free or something like that. But then I'm like, well, wait.
I think that's what it is.
So the only, you have this breakthrough in technology, but the only record of it is a cassette tape that's in a briefcase that's tied to your hand.
Okay, that's a little silly.
That's a little silly. And that's, one of the things I really like about Carpenter is he doesn't get precious with his filmmaking. He knows it's a good time. And so he's like, I got this cool fucking premise. Let's just do it. And the world is so colorful and so interesting. Like, what is up with the fucking burlesque show? Like, where did that come from? And it's like, there's people there that are like, there's customers sitting and watching this show. And there's all this really crazy fun stuff in it. And it's just a good time. He doesn't overthink it. Because, and maybe they leave it purposely vague. So then you won't be like, wait a minute, there's a fucking cassette tape is the only, way do they have it?
Well, I mean, it's the classic MacGuffin. I mean, when you have the classic MacGuffin, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I say this all the time when people go, well, why didn't you ever explain this thing? I'm like, it drives some people nuts that they never explain what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. I'm not one of those people. I don't give a fuck what's in that briefcase. The only thing that matters is that Marcellus Wallace wants his fucking briefcase back, and he sends these two hitmen to get it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that matters. What's in the briefcase is irrelevant.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or the tape. The tape is just the thing that they send Snake Plissken in to get.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
It's important he has to get it. So they send him into the prison, right?
Yeah. Or they explain the Ark of the Covenant, and then you realize that the whole journey of the hero, he didn't have to fucking do it like the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
He shows up and he's like, close your eyes. And they open up the Ark of the Covenant and just kills everybody. And it's like, well, goddamn, Harrison Ford, you could have just known that from the beginning and known they were going to fucking kill themselves. All that shit you went through to get there, all you had to do was just not be involved. They're going to kill themselves with it anyway,
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about before we move on? Oh, what is your, if I had to press you and say you're only allowed to watch one more Kurt Russell movie for the rest of your life, you can only rewatch one more Kurt Russell movie for the rest of your life. What movie would that be? What do you think is the greatest Kurt Russell performance?
The greatest Kurt Russell movie. That's tough, man.
So tough.
Because there's so many of his movies that to me are just rewatchable classics.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was narrowing it down, Escape from New York would definitely be on my list.
Right.
Like if I was trying to make a short list to pick one, it would be on that candidate list. Absolutely. But, this is a guy, we were just started this by talking about Kenneth Welsh, who worked for 60 years. Kurt Russell, he hasn't been working for 60 years, but damn close.
Yes.
I mean, this is a guy who was making teenage movies for Disney and has been making movies and TV shows nonstop ever since.
He was doing movies before his balls dropped.
It is 60 years. He started in Dennis the Menace in 1962.
There you go. Okay, so he's been working for 60 years. And the thing is, he's been making good stuff the whole time. Like, he made Escape from New York in the 80s. It was great. Quentin Tarantino did a movie as part of his Grindhouse project called Death Proof, where Kurt Russell plays the bad guy. And that was like, I don't know, what, 10 years ago?
He was fantastic.
He was great in that. He's great in that. He's still great.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, this is a guy who's
Bone
just been turning
Tomahawk.
in classic work. Bone Tomahawk is great, and he's great in it. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to pick just one performance.
It's hard.
He's just consistent.
It's so hard for me. But, you know, if I'd say what is his greatest performance, I would probably say Tombstone, but it's not the greatest movie because for me, it kind of falls apart in the third act. I mean, if that movie's
like the montage.
No, I do not like it. So if that movie's on, and I always watch the first act. If it's towards the end, I don't watch it. But I think
if you don't watch the end, then you miss out on the gunfight between Val Kilmer and Hicks.
But I do think that's like one of his big moments. You know, that's one of his greatest performances. But still, I mean, I just think Big Trouble in Little China, because of his sense of humor in the movie, like he's an action guy that just makes me laugh. You know,
I mean, if you held a gun to my head, I would probably wind up picking Big Trouble in Little China, not because I think it's the best Kurt Russell movie ever made, but because it is the most rewatchable Kurt Russell movie ever made.
Yeah,
Big Trouble in Little China is one of those movies. Like, I have my dozen movies that if I'm walking through a room and I glance over at the TV in somebody else's house and that movie is on, I sit down and I start watching it.
Yeah. Sorry,
Big Trouble in Little China is one of those movies.
Sorry, I know we're at a dinner party or whatever, but I'll be over here until the movie's over.
Yeah, I'm going to be over here. I'm watching Big Trouble in Little China. Can you just make me up a plate and bring it over here?
A sleeper for me is Tequila Sunrise. That's one of my favorite Kurt Russells.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I find it a little pretentious. I think Tequila Sunrise is trying desperately to be art, and I don't know.
Really? You think so?
It just comes across as pretentious to me.
I think it's just your standard run-of-the-mill crime thriller, and you got Mel Gibson and Kurt Russell, and I think
but it's so deliberately slow.
Really?
Every shot is so
I love that scene when they're busting Mel Gibson and he puts the cocaine in the bathroom toilet and he goes and so to me it's just kind of like a random. It's like, you know, getting Mel Gibson and Kurt Russell together and doing this thing, and I find it anyway. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I love this movie. I love John Carpenter, and I love you. And it's we were very lucky we get to do this.
Yeah. We got a few more John Carpenters coming up, so I'm looking forward to talking about those as we do our deep dive on the early career of one of our favorite directors.
Yeah,
probably everybody else is bored as shit. We're down to like 4. We went from 8 to 4 listeners because everybody's like, "God damn it, stop talking about fucking John Carpenter."
Yeah, we have for sure lost some audience that came for The Expanse, and they're like, John Carpenter? And there's probably a lot of people that are like, who? Who is John Carpenter?
I will say, though, for those of you who came here for The Expanse, John Carpenter's influence in his early sci-fi work, his influence on science fiction and science fiction on film, has a direct line to The Expanse. You know, he's one of those, like him, early Ridley Scott. There's a few directors who worked in sci-fi in the 70s and 80s. My formative years as a consumer of media, and though their influence is directly in The Expanse. So this stuff is all in there.
Thank you guys for coming out. This was a lot of fun. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.
And I hope Joseph put some Escape from New York soundtrack in here. Right here.
That would be good. Cincinnati.